Top story at this hour, Zimbabwean pastor Ivan Mawarire has been acquitted on all the charges that had been leveled against him. He had been charged with attempting to overthrow the government of former President Robert Mugabe. The case has dragged on since his arrest on the 1st of February this year. Mawarire had been detained several times.
Zimbabwean activist pastor Ivan Mawarire is finally a free man. The High Court in Zimbabwe acquitted Mawarire after months of legal battles with the governance of now former President Robert Mugabe.
The pastor is a free man. He has been acquitted of all the charges, and we welcome the judgment.
Mawarire rose to fame after posting a protest video of himself draped in the Zimbabwe flag. He spoke against the economic hardships in Zimbabwe and expressed the plight of Zimbabweans. He was the frontrunner in organizing a stay-away protest which shut down towns and major cities across the country in July, a move that landed him in hot water. He was detained for inciting public violence but later freed. Mawarire says he now hopes the new administration will do things differently.
I am absolutely elated today that the courts have decided, after considering the evidence that came before them, that I am not guilty and that the charges that were leveled against me do not hold any water, and of course they have proceeded to discharge me on both charges. One which was the main charge, which was subverting a constitutional government, and the alternative charge, which was inciting public violence.
He warned Zimbabwe's new president Emmerson Mnangagwa, a veteran from the ruling ZANU-PF party, against stifling people's rights.
I do hope that the new administration that is coming in with the new president is going to be more aware that the citizens of our nation are not enemies to our government, but that they are allies in building a better Zimbabwe, that they need to be listened to.
Most Zimbabweans will see Mawarire's acquittal as a symbolic victory, coming just after Mugabe's resignation and the inauguration of his former deputy, Emmerson Mnangagwa, as president. Bureau Report, ANN7.
Winds of change are surely sweeping across Zimbabwe. The newly appointed interim government says it will arrest and prosecute those who fail to return public funds illegally stashed abroad. The government says it applies on both individuals and companies, and the deadline is February 2018. The Zimbabwean government will arrest and prosecute those who fail to return public funds illegally stashed abroad by individuals and companies at the end of February 2018. New President Emmerson Mnangagwa has offered a 3-month amnesty for individuals and companies to surrender public funds illegally stashed abroad. He is calling on those implicated to act accordingly or face the full might of the law. Mnangagwa's reference to Operation Restore Legacy, the military operation that led to President Mugabe's resignation, appears to have specific public officials in mind. The operation has already seen former Finance Minister Ignatius Chombo arrested and charged with corruption, charges his family say are trumped up. Since 2009, Zimbabwe has been using the US dollar as its main currency after abandoning its own local dollar. This has led to massive smuggling of the greenback to offshore accounts. It is estimated that $2 billion is illegally held in foreign bank accounts. The move to recoup lost public funds is seen as an attempt to boost Zimbabwe's ailing economy, which is half the size it was at the turn of the millennium. The economy has struggled since land reforms were introduced in 2000. These reforms saw white-owned farms redistributed to landless black Zimbabweans and those with good political connections, which led to sharp falls in production. Bureau Report, ANN7. Fidelis Mukonori, the priest who mediated Robert Mugabe's exit in what was a Simic moment in Zimbabwe's history, says the 93-year-old appeared relieved after signing his resignation letter. It was the culmination of a chaotic fortnight, which began when Mugabe fired his deputy Emerson Mnangagwa, prompting a military takeover and mass street protests, which eventually forced him out, ending a 37-year reign that will best be remembered for its economic ruin. The resignation letter, which was read out in Parliament on the 21st of November, was the result of days of mounting pressure and back-and-forth negotiations with the military generals, which were chaired by Mukonori. Mukonori has known Mugabe for more than 40 years and says they are candid with each other.
When the letter was written, he looked at it, read it through, and just gracefully took his pen and signed. And as soon as he finished the signature, the face just glowed. Really a sign of saying, it's done. I no longer, I've done what I have to. You see the handsomeness of the man after signing. Just that he has completed his job. That's the best thing he could have done. The man had served 37 years in the country. The man had put his over 25 years of politics before the 37 years he had to run the country. And definitely it was time for him to rest. He deserved the rest.
Now going back to our top story, Zimbabwean pastor Ivan Mawarire has been acquitted on all the charges that had been leveled against him. And we are now joined by Frank Chikowore, correspondent from Harare. A very warm welcome to you and thank you so much for your time. Please talk us through the charges that Mawarire had faced and also just take us through what the court said about the charges today.
Pastor Ivan Mawarire was facing charges of attempting to subvert a constitutionally elected government that was then led by President Robert Mugabe, who has since been deposed. He was also facing an alternative charge of incitement, that is inciting Zimbabweans to commit public violence. But the defense attorney, Harrison Nkomo, applied at the close of the state case for discharge of the prominent protest pastor Ivan Mawarire. And the High Court judge, Priscilla Chigumba, ruled that there was no prima facie case that the state could raise against Ivan Mawarire. And she threw out all the charges that were being leveled against Mawarire that emanated from the protest that took place in Zimbabwe sometime in July last year, when Zimbabweans took to the streets to protest against the failures of the Mugabe administration. The judge ruled that the state could not provide any evidence to link Mawarire to the alleged offenses. Therefore, Mawarire is now a free man. In fact, the judge also said that the right to demonstrate is enshrined in the country's constitution. Therefore, it is not an offense for anyone to demonstrate, and there was no nexus to the alleged videos that were presented as evidence in court by the State Council to link Ivan Mawarire to the commission of the alleged offenses. Also, in the court today was an issue to do with Zimbabweans who were born out of Zimbabweans who have parents of foreign origin. The court ruled that those Zimbabweans should be allowed to participate in the next elections. These people have not been able to cast their ballots in the previous elections. So 2018 is going to present a new opportunity for them to cast their ballots for the very first time. So we are talking of close to 2 million people, according to the opposition movement for democratic change led by former Prime Minister Mnangagwa, which says that these people have not been able to cast their ballots because they were perceived to be members of the opposition by virtue of them having been employees of former white commercial farmers who were displaced during Zimbabwe's chaotic land reforms that were embarked on by the Mugabe administration around 2000, which displaced close to 4,000 white commercial farmers, according to the Zimbabwe Commercial Farmers Union.
And were there supporters outside a court from the hashtag This Flag movement supporting Mawarire? And what did they have to say about what took place in court today?
Well, it was a low-key event at the High Court. There were only a few people who attended the court session, which was not publicized a lot, but it was a key moment for Ivan Mawarire, who had to endure more than 11 months with charges of subversion hanging over his head. It was a very important decision that was made by the High Court today, to an extent that Ivan Mawarire had to challenge the authorities under the new administration led by Emerson Mnangagwa to ensure that people who are still facing the same charges as he was facing are freed.
And do we know what is Mawarire's next move from here?
I spoke to Mawarire just a few minutes after the decision was made by the High Court, and he told me that the next step going forward is to ensure that the rights of Zimbabweans are protected. They are going to be demanding those rights as enshrined in the national constitution. They are going to be escalating the protest ahead of the next election so that key democratic reforms are implemented before the next plebiscite, which is due in the next 6 to 7 months' time.
And did he talk about forming his own party?
Well, he did not allude to something like that, but he was simply saying that he is there to fight for the rights of the Zimbabweans to be respected by any government that would be in power. With particular reference to Mr. Mnangagwa's government, he indicated that he expects Mr. Mnangagwa to ensure that the rights of Zimbabweans, as enshrined in the National Charter, are adhered to, and they will be pushing very hard to ensure that Mr. Mnangagwa and his administration would push for the reforms, like I said earlier, to be implemented before the next coming elections, where we expect thousands of people to be casting their ballots as the registration process has since been commenced by the Electoral Commission.
All right. Thank you very much for those details. That was Frank Chikowore, correspondent from Harare, just giving us more details as Zimbabwean Pastor Ivan Mawarire has been acquitted on all the charges that had been leveled against him.